The shuttle descended toward Harmony Nexus with a smooth glide that made Captain Ryan Mitchell feel almost relaxed. He sat in the passenger section with Dr. Lisa Brennan beside him, and both of them stared out the viewport at the massive diplomatic station growing larger in their view. The station looked like a spinning wheel made of crystal and metal, with hundreds of docking ports dotting its surface like tiny caves. Ships of every imaginable design came and went in carefully controlled patterns, and Ryan noticed that none of them looked anything like human vessels. Lisa pressed her face closer to the window like an excited child. She had been talking non-stop for the past hour about the different species they might meet and the biological variations she hoped to study. Ryan had learned to tune out about half of what she said, but he appreciated her enthusiasm. Someone had to be excited about this mission, because he was mostly just nervous. The United Earth government had spent 3 years exchanging messages with the Galactic Council before finally receiving an invitation to present their case for membership. Ryan had been chosen as security chief for the diplomatic team because of his military background and his ability to stay calm under pressure. Lisa had been selected as the cultural attaché and xenobiologist because she was brilliant and could talk to anyone about anything. Together, they were supposed to represent the best of humanity. Their shuttle pilot was a young man named Kyle Barnes, who seemed far too relaxed for someone flying near an alien space station. He hummed something under his breath as he guided them toward their assigned docking port. The council had been very specific about which port they should use, and Kyle followed the instructions exactly. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk that echoed through the shuttle. Ryan unbuckled his harness and stood up while rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness from the long flight. Lisa bounced to her feet and grabbed her datapad with both hands. She was already scrolling through files about council species and their customs. Kyle opened the airlock and the 3 humans stepped into the docking corridor. Ryan expected to see some kind of welcoming committee or at least a few curious aliens. Instead, the corridor was empty except for 3 floating security drones that hovered near the ceiling. The drones had smooth silver surfaces and what looked like sensor arrays pointing in every direction. One of them descended to eye level and projected a holographic display showing directions to their quarters. Lisa frowned at the empty corridor. She had prepared at least a dozen different greetings in various alien languages. Ryan felt the absence of any living beings as a warning sign, but he kept his expression neutral. They followed the holographic arrows through the winding corridors while the security drones floated along behind them. The station interior was beautiful in an alien way. The walls curved in impossible angles and the lighting seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, and Ryan found himself taking longer steps than usual. Signs in dozens of different writing systems pointed toward various sections of the station, but none of them were in English yet. They passed several intersections, and at each one Ryan noticed aliens who quickly moved away when they saw the humans approaching. A tall being with blue skin and 4 arms flattened itself against the wall as they walked by. A small furry creature that reminded Ryan of a cat darted into a side passage. 2 floating jellyfish-like beings actually reversed direction and fled back the way they had come. Lisa noticed it too. She slowed her pace and looked at Ryan with confusion in her eyes. He shrugged because he had no explanation. Maybe humans smelled bad to aliens, or maybe they were supposed to use a different corridor. Either way, no one was stopping them or asking them to leave, so they kept walking. Their assigned quarters turned out to be a large suite at the end of an isolated corridor. The door was much thicker than the other doors they had passed, and it had what looked like reinforced hinges. The security drone stopped outside while Ryan pressed his hand against the access panel. The door slid open with a heavy grinding sound that made him think of vault doors. The interior of the suite was spacious and well-furnished, but something felt off about it. The walls were much thicker than they needed to be, and the furniture was bolted to the floor. The windows looked out onto space, but they were made of material that looked far too strong to be ordinary glass. Lisa walked around touching things and examining the room with her scientific curiosity while Ryan checked the secondary exits and noted that there were emergency force fields built into every doorway. A chime sounded, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. The image showed an amphibious being with slick green skin and large golden eyes. It had 4 arms like the blue alien they had seen earlier, but this one was much smaller and seemed to be trembling slightly. The being spoke in a language that sounded like bubbling, water, but a translator device rendered it into English with only a slight delay. It introduced itself as Vestic and explained that it had been assigned as their guide during their stay on Harmony Nexus. Vestic spoke quickly and kept glancing to the side as if looking for an escape route. It asked if they needed anything and listed several amenities available in their quarters. Lisa smiled at the hologram and thanked Vestic warmly. She asked when they would be able to meet other council members and explore the station. Vestic seemed surprised by the question and took a long moment before responding. It explained that humans had been classified as a Level 7 species from a Class 12 death world, and that special protocols were in place for their safety and the safety of others. Ryan and Lisa exchanged glances. Neither of them knew what a Class 12 death world meant, but it did not sound like a compliment. Ryan asked Vestic to explain the classification system, but the alien became even more agitated. It stammered something about environmental ratings and biological hazard assessments, before abruptly stating that a full briefing would be provided the next day. The hologram flickered and disappeared. Lisa sat down on one of the bolted chairs and stared at the spot where Vestic's image had been. She looked at Ryan with a mix of confusion and concern. He recognized that expression because he felt the same way. They had come here as diplomats and ambassadors ready to make friends with alien species and join a galactic community. Instead, they were being treated like dangerous animals that needed to be contained. Ryan walked to the reinforced window and looked out at the stars. He could see other sections of the station from this angle, and he noticed that their suite was in an isolated spoke far from the central hub. Ships passed by in the distance, but none came near their section. He had survived combat missions and natural disasters and political negotiations, but this was something entirely different. This was being feared by people he had never even met. Lisa joined him at the window. She did not say anything for a while, but eventually she spoke in a quiet voice. She wondered aloud if coming here had been a mistake. Ryan did not have an answer for that. All he knew was that tomorrow they would attend their first council session, and hopefully they would start to understand why the galaxy seemed so terrified of them. The council chamber was the largest room Ryan had ever seen. It stretched upward in a vast dome that seemed to go on forever, and the walls were lined with platforms at different heights. Each platform held delegates from various species, and Ryan counted at least 50 different types of beings before he stopped trying to keep track. Some floated in containment bubbles filled with liquid, while others perched on specially designed structures. The variety was overwhelming and fascinating at the same time. Lisa gripped her datapad tightly as they were guided to their designated platform. She kept looking around with wide eyes, and Ryan could tell she was trying to memorize every detail. Their platform was located near the bottom of the chamber, but it was separated from the others by a noticeable gap. The metal beneath their feet was darker and thicker than the platforms nearby, and it had reinforced barriers around the edges. Vestic hovered in a small floating pod nearby, but kept at least 3 meters away from them. The amphibious being had met them outside their quarters that morning, and had barely made eye contact during the entire journey to the chamber. Now Vestic explained through the translator that the session would begin shortly and that humans should remain on their platform unless specifically invited to move elsewhere. The chamber lights dimmed and a series of holographic displays appeared in the center of the room. A tall being with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns began speaking in a melodic voice. The translator rendered it as a formal greeting and an outline of the day's agenda. Ryan tried to pay attention, but he found himself watching the other delegates instead. Many of them kept glancing toward the human platform with what looked like nervous curiosity. The council proceeded with standard business items that meant nothing to Ryan. They discussed trade agreements between systems he had never heard of and debated environmental regulations for planets, whose names he could not pronounce. Lisa took notes on everything and occasionally whispered observations about different species' behaviors. She pointed out that most of the delegates moved very slowly and deliberately compared to humans. An hour into the session, an urgent alert interrupted the proceedings. The crystalline being who seemed to be leading the session received a message that caused visible distress. Its light patterns shifted to darker colors, and it spoke rapidly in its own language before the translator caught up. There had been an accident on a mining facility located on Talaxis 4. A structural collapse had trapped 200 workers in an unstable, section of the underground complex. The chamber erupted in concerned voices that blended into a cacophony of alien languages. The holographic displays shifted to show images of the mining facility. Ryan leaned forward to study the layout, and his military training kicked in automatically. He could see that the collapsed section was deep underground with multiple levels and failing support structures. Debris was still shifting according to the sensor readings, and the gravity plating in that section was malfunctioning. Lisa whispered that this was bad. Ryan nodded because he could see exactly how bad it was. The facility's environmental systems were failing, and the trapped workers had limited time before the air became toxic or the remaining structure collapsed completely. The council began debating rescue options, but every proposal seemed to hit the same problem. The conditions in the collapsed section were too dangerous for most species to handle. A delegate with tentacles and multiple eye stalks explained that the gravity in the affected area had destabilized to 0.9 Earth standard. Several other delegates made sounds of dismay at this information. Another being that looked like a walking plant mentioned that temperatures in some corridors had risen to 40 degrees Celsius. More sounds of distress rippled through the chamber. Ryan looked at Lisa with confusion. She had the same puzzled expression on her face. 0.9 gravity was actually less than Earth's normal gravity of 1.0. 40 degrees Celsius was hot, but it was not immediately lethal. He had worked in worse conditions during desert training exercises. Lisa seemed to be thinking the same thing because she pulled up Earth's environmental data on her pad and stared at it. The council continued debating. They discussed sending in remote drones, but the unstable conditions made drone operation difficult. They considered using robotic units, but those would take too long to arrive from the nearest facility. Some delegates suggested simply waiting for the structure to stabilize on its own, but others pointed out that the trapped workers did not have that much time. Lisa leaned close to Ryan and spoke quietly. She said that humans could probably handle those conditions without too much difficulty. Ryan had already reached the same conclusion. He thought about the implications for a moment and then made a decision. He stood up from his seat, and his movement caught the attention of nearby delegates. The chamber fell silent as Ryan activated the communication system on their platform. His voice echoed through the vast space as he spoke. He explained that he had experience with rescue operations in unstable environments. He mentioned that Earth's gravity was 1.0 standard, and that humans regularly functioned in those conditions. He offered to contact Earth and arrange for a human rescue team to deploy within 6 hours. The silence that followed his offer was absolute. Every delegate in the chamber seemed frozen in place. Even the floating jellyfish beings stopped their gentle drifting. The crystalline session leader stared at Ryan with an expression that might have been shock or disbelief. Vestic made a sound like a strangled gasp and nearly fell out of its floating pod. A new voice spoke from one of the upper platforms. It belonged to an insectoid being with multiple legs and compound eyes that glittered in the chamber lighting. The being identified itself as Dr. Krineth and asked Ryan to confirm that humans lived and worked in 1.0 gravity as a normal condition. Ryan confirmed this and added that Earth's gravity was actually the standard by which other gravities were measured. Dr. Krineth made a clicking sound that the translator struggled to interpret. It asked Lisa if she could verify this information. Lisa stood up and explained that yes, humans evolved in 1.0 gravity, and that their entire biology was designed to function under those conditions. She mentioned that human bones were dense enough to support their body weight in that gravity, and that human muscles were strong enough to move efficiently. The chamber erupted in excited and alarmed chatter. Delegates spoke over each other in dozens of languages, and the translators had difficulty keeping up. The crystalline leader called for order, and the noise gradually subsided. It asked Ryan and Lisa to demonstrate their physical capabilities so the council could assess whether humans were truly suited for the rescue operation. Ryan was not sure what kind of demonstration they expected, but he was willing to try. He asked what they wanted to see. The crystalline leader conferred with several other delegates before responding. It asked if Ryan could perform basic physical exercises in the current gravity, which was set at 0.6 Earth standard for the comfort of most council species. Ryan shrugged and dropped to the platform floor. He began doing push-ups at a steady pace and counted them out loud. He reached 20 before he noticed that the entire chamber had gone silent again. He continued to 50 and then stood up. Lisa was staring at him with an odd expression. and Vestik looked like it might faint. Dr. Krinath spoke again with clear agitation in its translated voice. It asked if Ryan had just lifted his entire body weight 50 times using only his arms. Ryan confirmed that yes, he had done push-ups, which were a basic exercise that most humans could perform. He offered to demonstrate other exercises if they wanted. Lisa decided to help. She walked to the edge of their platform where several supply containers were stored. She bent down and picked up one of the containers with both hands and lifted it to chest height. The container was labeled as requiring a 4-person team to move. She held it steady for a moment and then set it back down gently. The chamber exploded with noise again. Delegates were standing or floating or hovering in agitation. Some seemed excited while others appeared terrified. The crystalline leader struggled to restore order and finally had to activate some kind of sound-dampening field. When the chamber was quiet again, it looked directly at Ryan and Lisa, with what might have been respect or fear or both. It declared that humans were clearly capable of operating in the extreme conditions of the mining facility, and that their offer of assistance was accepted with gratitude and considerable amazement. The council medical facility was sterile and cold in a way that reminded Ryan of hospitals back on Earth. Dr. Krinath had insisted on full medical evaluations before approving the rescue mission, and Ryan could not argue with the logic. If humans were going to represent Earth in a dangerous operation, then the council needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. Lisa sat on an examination table that was too small for her, while medical instruments hovered around her body taking readings. The instruments beeped and chirped in patterns that seemed to distress the medical staff. Dr. Krinath watched the data displays with its compound eyes reflecting the light in unsettling ways. Several other medical personnel from different species stood at a safe distance and monitored additional screens. Ryan waited his turn in an observation room, separated by a transparent barrier. He could see everything happening in the examination area, and he noticed that the medical staff seemed nervous. They moved carefully around Lisa and used remote instruments whenever possible instead of getting close to her. One of them accidentally bumped into her arm and immediately jumped back as if burned. The first round of tests focused on basic biology. They scanned Lisa's skeletal structure and the results appeared on a large holographic display. Dr. Krinath made clicking sounds of distress as it studied the images. It called over another physician who looked like a floating mass of tentacles with sensory organs at the tips. They examined Lisa's bone density readings together and seemed to be having a heated discussion. Lisa asked what was wrong. Dr. Krinath turned to face her and explained through the translator that human bones were impossibly dense. The calcium deposits in her skeleton would require enormous amounts of energy to maintain, and the weight alone should make movement difficult. Yet Lisa moved with ease and even grace. The doctor asked how humans managed to carry such heavy internal structures. Lisa explained patiently that human bones needed to be strong to support their bodies in Earth's gravity. She mentioned that human bones could withstand significant force and heal themselves when broken. This information caused Dr. Krinath to make more distressed clicking sounds. The concept of bones that could repair themselves seemed to be particularly troubling. The next series of tests examined Lisa's cardiovascular system. They measured her blood oxygen levels and immediately called for Ryan to be brought in for comparison readings. The medical staff thought their instruments were malfunctioning because the oxygen concentration in human blood was far higher than anything they considered safe. Dr. Krinath explained that such oxygen levels would be toxic to most council species and cause rapid cellular damage. Ryan rolled up his sleeve so they could take a blood sample. He watched as the needle pierced his skin and drew dark red blood into a collection vial. Several medical staff members actually moved farther away when they saw the color. One of them asked if human blood was always that color and seemed horrified when Ryan confirmed it was. Dr. Krinath analyzed the sample and discovered that human blood cells were packed with iron-based hemoglobin, designed to carry massive amounts of oxygen throughout the body. Lisa tried to explain that Earth's atmosphere had higher oxygen content than most worlds and that humans needed efficient oxygen transport to fuel their high-energy biology. This explanation did not seem to comfort the medical staff. If anything, they appeared more concerned. Dr. Krinath muttered something about aggressive biological systems that the translator barely caught. The examination moved on to digestive systems. They asked Lisa what humans typically ate, and she began listing common foods. She mentioned fruits and vegetables, which seemed acceptable to the medical staff. Then she mentioned meat, and the room fell silent. Dr. Krinath asked her to clarify if she meant that humans consumed the flesh of other animals. Lisa confirmed this and added that humans were omnivores capable of digesting both plant and animal matter. Ryan decided to add that humans had evolved as hunters and that meat had been a crucial part of human development. This information caused 3 medical staff members to excuse themselves from the room. Dr. Krinath's clicking became more rapid and agitated. It asked to analyze human stomach acid, and when the results came back showing a pH level that could dissolve metals, the doctor had to sit down on a nearby support structure. Lisa pulled out a nutrition bar from her pocket to eat because she was getting hungry. The medical staff watched in fascination and horror as she unwrapped it and took a bite. Dr. Krinath asked what the bar contained. Lisa read the ingredients list, which included processed grains and synthetic vitamins and something called natural flavoring. She also mentioned that she had added hot sauce to her breakfast that morning for extra flavor. Dr. Krinath asked what hot sauce was. Lisa explained that it was a liquid made from capsaicin, which was a chemical compound found in peppers that created a burning sensation. She said humans enjoyed this sensation and added capsaicin products to many foods. The doctor stared at her in silence for a long moment before checking its database. It discovered that capsaicin was listed as a chemical irritant and defensive compound used by several species as a non-lethal weapon. Ryan mentioned that he had drunk coffee before coming to the medical facility. When asked to describe coffee, he explained it was made from roasted plant seeds that were ground into powder and then steeped in boiling water. The fact that humans regularly consumed liquids at 100 degrees Celsius caused another minor panic. Dr. Krinath pointed out that such temperatures would cause severe tissue damage to most species. Lisa tried to calm everyone down by explaining that human mouths and throats had evolved to handle hot foods and liquids. She mentioned that humans also ate frozen foods at the other extreme of the temperature range. Dr. Krinath asked how human tissues could survive such temperature variations, and Lisa could only shrug and say that it was normal for humans. The examination continued for another hour. They discovered that the human immune system was extraordinarily aggressive and attacked foreign organisms with what Dr. Krinath described as militaristic efficiency. They learned that humans carried billions of bacteria in their digestive systems that helped break down food, and that these bacteria were essential for human survival. They found out that human skin was tough enough to resist minor cuts and abrasions that would seriously injure many council species. Ryan mentioned casually that humans had survived an ice age on Earth. Dr. Krinath stopped what it was doing and asked him to repeat that statement. Ryan explained that roughly 20,000 years ago, Earth had been much colder and covered in glaciers, but humans had survived by adapting and cooperating. Lisa added that humans had also coexisted with large predatory animals, including creatures that could kill humans easily. Dr. Krinath accessed its database again and pulled up Earth's historical climate data. It studied the information with growing alarm. It discovered that Earth's temperature ranges were extreme by galactic standards, and that the planet had gone through multiple extinction events. Yet humans and their ancestors had survived all of them. The doctor made a sound that the translator interpreted as a distressed whistle. The final revelation came when Dr. Krinath asked about human food preservation methods. Lisa explained that humans used refrigeration and freezing, but also used fermentation and controlled bacterial decay. She described cheese as milk that had been transformed by bacteria and yogurt as a similar process. She mentioned that humans also consumed pickled foods that had been preserved in acid solutions. Dr. Krinath sat in silence for several minutes, processing all the information. Finally, it announced that human biology was far more extreme than initially assessed. It accessed the Council classification system and changed Earth's rating from Class 12 to Class 13. The doctor explained that Class 13 had been theoretical because no one thought a species could evolve in such hostile conditions and still develop advanced intelligence and civilization. Ryan and Lisa looked at each other with concern. They had come to the Council as diplomats hoping to make friends and allies. Instead, They were being classified as biological impossibilities from a nightmare world. Ryan asked if they were still cleared for the rescue mission. Dr. Krinath clicked thoughtfully and then said yes, because if anyone could survive the conditions on Talaxis 4, it would be humans. The doctor added quietly that it was beginning to understand that humans were survivors above all else, and that perhaps the galaxy needed survivors like them. The mining facility on Talaxis 4 looked worse in person than it had in the sensor readings. Ryan stood at the entrance to the collapsed section and studied the twisted metal and broken support beams that blocked the main corridor. Emergency lighting flickered in irregular patterns and cast strange shadows on the debris-strewn floor. The air smelled of burnt electronics and leaking coolant and something else he could not identify. Lisa checked her equipment one more time. They both wore standard human hazard gear, which consisted of reinforced suits with built-in air filtration and communication systems. The council observers had been shocked at how lightweight the suits were compared to the extreme environment gear their own species required. Ryan had explained that human gear was designed for mobility because humans often had to move quickly in dangerous situations. The remote drones that accompanied them hovered nearby and transmitted everything back to the council rescue coordinators on Harmony. Nexus. Dr. Krinath was monitoring their vital signs and had already expressed concern 3 times about the conditions they were about to enter. Ryan had assured the doctor that they had trained for exactly this type of scenario. They moved into the collapsed section with Ryan taking point. His helmet light cut through the darkness and revealed a maze of fallen ceiling panels and buckled floor plates. The gravity was unstable here, and Ryan could feel it shifting under his feet. One moment it felt almost normal, and the next it dropped to what felt like 0.7 and then surged back up to 1.2. Most species would have struggled to maintain balance, but Ryan adjusted his stance automatically with each fluctuation. Lisa followed close behind and scanned the area with her handheld sensor unit. She was tracking life signs and had already located the largest group of trapped miners about 200 meters ahead. The problem was that the path to them was blocked by unstable debris and at least 2 sections where the floor had partially collapsed. They would have to navigate carefully to avoid triggering another cave-in. The temperature began climbing as they moved deeper into the facility. A coolant line had ruptured somewhere nearby, and the heat from the exposed mining equipment was raising the ambient temperature rapidly. Ryan's suit display showed 45 degrees Celsius and rising. He heard Dr. Krinath make distressed sounds over the communication channel, but the doctor did not order them to retreat. They reached the first major obstacle, which was a collapsed support beam that blocked the entire corridor. The beam was made of some kind of dense alloy, and it would take heavy equipment to move it under normal circumstances. Ryan examined the beam and estimated it weighed at least 2 tons. He looked at Lisa, and she nodded in understanding. They both grabbed one end of the beam and lifted together. The beam rose slowly off the ground. Ryan felt the weight in his arms and shoulders and back, but his muscles handled it without trouble. They shuffled sideways while carrying the beam and set it down against the wall, where it would not block their path. The entire process took about 30 seconds, and Ryan barely felt winded. On the communication channel, he heard several council observers making sounds of shock and disbelief. They continued forward and found the first group of trapped miners in a small chamber that had been partially sealed by falling debris. There were 12 aliens of various species huddled together in the darkness. When Ryan's helmet light illuminated them, they shrank back in fear. Lisa immediately switched on her suit's external speakers and spoke in a gentle voice. She explained that they were here to help and that they would get everyone out safely. One of the miners was a Quillari like Vestic, but much younger and smaller. The child was clutching an adult who appeared to be unconscious or badly injured. The child looked at Lisa with large golden eyes that reflected the helmet lights and made a sound that the translator interpreted as a frightened whimper. Lisa knelt down despite the unstable floor and held out her hand slowly. She told the child that everything would be okay. The child hesitated but then reached out and grabbed Lisa's gloved hand. Lisa carefully lifted the child and cradled it against her chest while checking the injured adult. Ryan scanned the adult and saw that it was alive but had suffered from oxygen deprivation. They needed to move fast. He organized the other miners into a group and explained that they needed to follow him back to the safe zone. The journey back was harder with the miners in tow. Most of them could barely walk in the fluctuating gravity, and the rising temperature was affecting them badly. Ryan ended up carrying 3 of the smaller aliens, while Lisa carried the Kolari child in one arm and supported 2 others with her free arm. The aliens were terrified of being carried by humans, but they were too weak to protest. They delivered the first group to the emergency medical teams waiting at the safe zone. The medics rushed forward with specialized equipment and began treating the rescued miners immediately. The Kolari child refused to let go of Lisa until its injured parent was stabilized. Lisa stayed with the child and spoke soothingly while the medical team worked. Ryan noticed that the child's fear was gradually being replaced by something else that might have been trust. They made 4 more trips into the collapsed section over the next 3 hours. Each trip was more dangerous than the last as the facility continued to deteriorate. On the 3rd trip, they had to navigate through a corridor where the temperature had reached 68 degrees Celsius. The heat was intense enough that Ryan could feel it through his suit, but it was manageable. On the 4th trip, they encountered a section where the gravity had surged to 1.4 and they had to crawl under fallen equipment while carrying injured miners. The final group of trapped workers was in the deepest part of the collapsed section. The path to them required passing through an area where the floor had buckled and created a steep incline at a 45-degree angle. The gravity in that section was stuck at 1.2, and debris was still sliding down the slope. Ryan went first and found handholds in the broken metal to pull himself up. Lisa followed with equal ease while the council observers watched in amazement through the drone feeds. They found 8 miners in the final chamber, and all of them were in bad condition. The air in this section had become toxic and several of the aliens had lost consciousness. Ryan and Lisa worked quickly to assess each miner and determine who needed immediate evacuation. There was no time for multiple trips, so they would have to carry everyone at once. Ryan loaded 4 miners onto his back and shoulders, using emergency carry techniques he had learned in military training. Lisa took 3 more and they left 1 conscious miner to walk between them with support. The return journey was brutal. The weight of the miners combined with the high gravity and climbing the steep incline pushed even human endurance to its limits. Ryan felt his muscles burning and his breathing became labored, but he did not stop moving. They were halfway up the incline when a deep rumbling sound echoed through the corridor. More of the ceiling was collapsing behind them and debris began raining down. Ryan shouted for Lisa to move faster, and they both broke into a stumbling run despite the impossible weight they carried. A support beam crashed down right where they had been standing seconds before. They emerged from the danger zone with their final group of miners and handed them over to the medical teams. Ryan dropped to one knee, breathing hard while Lisa leaned against a wall. The rescue was complete. All 200 trapped workers had been evacuated, and only a handful had serious injuries. The facility's remaining structure collapsed completely about 10 minutes later and filled the corridor they had been using with tons of rubble. Dr. Kreneth's voice came over the communication channel congratulating them on a successful rescue. The doctor added that it had recorded everything and that the council would be reviewing the operation in detail. Ryan and Lisa removed their helmets and looked at each other. They were exhausted and covered in sweat, but they were alive, and more importantly, everyone they had gone in to save was alive too. The Kolari child approached Lisa again with less fear than before. It held out a small object that looked like a charm or token and pressed it into Lisa's hand. The child said something in its own language that the translator rendered as a simple thank you. Lisa knelt down and hugged the child gently and told it that it was very brave. Around them, the rescued miners were being loaded onto medical transports, and several of them looked back at the 2 humans with expressions that seemed less terrified and more grateful. The council chamber was packed with delegates from every member species when Ryan and Lisa entered 1 week after the rescue. The atmosphere felt different this time. Instead of nervous avoidance, Ryan noticed that many delegates were watching them with open curiosity. Some even nodded in what might have been respectful greeting. Vestik met them at the entrance, and for the first time, the amphibious guide approached within a meter of them without visible trembling. Their platform had been moved closer to the center of the chamber. It was no longer isolated at the edge, but positioned among the other delegate platforms, where they could participate more easily in discussions. Lisa noticed this change immediately and smiled. Ryan felt cautiously optimistic, but he knew the Vote on Humanity's membership application was still uncertain. The crystalline session leader called the chamber to order, and the various conversations faded to silence. It announced that today's session would focus on the application of humanity to join the Galactic Council as a provisional member species. The leader explained that there had been considerable debate over the past week and that many perspectives would be heard before the final vote. The first speaker was a tall being with metallic skin that reflected light like mirrors. It represented a species called the Zarn, who were known for their cautious approach to new members. The Zarn delegate argued that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable. It pointed to Earth's classification as a Class 13 death world and stated that no species from such an extreme environment had ever been considered for council membership before. The delegate suggested that humanity should be observed for at least another decade before any decision was made. Several other delegates voiced similar concerns. They spoke about the need for caution and the importance of maintaining stability in the council. They referenced the medical reports from Dr. Krinyath and expressed worry about what other shocking capabilities humans might possess. One delegate even suggested that humans might become aggressive or violent if stressed, despite having no evidence to support this claim. Ryan felt frustration building but kept his expression neutral. Lisa reached over and squeezed his hand briefly in a gesture of support. They had expected opposition, but hearing themselves described as potential threats still stung. They had risked their lives to save council citizens and were still being treated with suspicion. Then Vestik rose to speak. The Quillari delegate's platform lifted higher so everyone could see and hear clearly. Vestik's voice carried through the chamber with surprising strength. It began by acknowledging that yes, humans were from a death world, and yes, they possessed capabilities that seemed impossible to most species. But Vestik argued that these traits were not reasons to fear humans, but reasons to welcome them. Vestik explained that it had spent a week observing Ryan and Lisa closely. It had seen them eat meals and noticed they chose foods carefully to avoid offending species who might find certain items disturbing. It had watched them modify their movements to seem less threatening and heard them speak with patience and kindness even when treated with fear. Vestik stated that humans were aware of how others perceived them and actively tried to make others comfortable. The Quillari delegate continued with growing passion. It described how humans evolved not by conquering each other but by working together against a hostile environment. Their planet tried to kill them with extreme weather and dangerous predators and natural disasters, but instead of making them cruel, it made them cooperative. They learned to help each other survive because alone they would have perished. Vestik's voice grew softer as it spoke about the rescue operation. It described watching the drone feeds as Ryan and Lisa entered conditions that would kill most council species within minutes. It talked about seeing them carry impossible weights through deadly environments without hesitation. But most importantly, it mentioned the moment when Lisa comforted the frightened Quillari child and how that simple act of kindness revealed more about human nature than any medical scan ever could. The chamber was completely silent as Vestik finished speaking. The delegate looked directly at Ryan and Lisa and said that humans were exactly what the council needed. They were strong enough to help those who could not help themselves and compassionate enough to want to help in the first place. Vestik sat down and the chamber remained quiet. For a long moment, the next speaker was one of the rescued miners from Talaxis 4. It was a small furry being who walked with a slight limp from injuries sustained in the collapse. It spoke briefly but powerfully about being trapped in the darkness with failing air and thinking it would die there. It described the moment when a light appeared and a voice in a strange language told them help had arrived. It said that when the human lifted it onto broad shoulders and carried it to safety, it felt safer than it had ever felt in its life. More rescued miners spoke after that. Each one told similar stories of fear transforming into gratitude. A parent of the Quillari child stood and said that it would trust its child with Lisa without any hesitation. Another miner displayed the recording from its suit camera, showing Ryan holding up a collapsing support beam with his bare hands, while others escaped underneath. The footage played on the holographic displays for everyone to see. Dr. Krinyath spoke next and surprised everyone by supporting humanity's application. The doctor admitted that human biology was terrifying from a medical perspective, but stated that the rescue operation had proven humans could be trusted with power. Dr. Krinyath argued that strength without compassion was dangerous, but strength combined with compassion, was invaluable. The crystalline session leader gave Ryan and Lisa permission to address the council directly. Lisa stood first and walked to the center platform where speakers could be seen by everyone. She spoke without notes or preparation, and her voice was steady and clear. She talked about humanity's long journey from primitive ancestors to spacefaring civilization. She described how humans learned to master fire and tools and language. She explained how they survived ice ages and plagues and wars and somehow kept moving forward. Lisa acknowledged that humans were dangerous in the same way that any survivor was dangerous. They had sharp teeth and strong muscles and aggressive immune systems because their world demanded those things for survival. But she emphasized that humans also had art and music and literature. They had philosophy and mathematics and science. They dreamed of exploring the stars not to conquer, but to learn and discover and make friends with other species who shared those dreams. Ryan stood next, and his speech was shorter, but equally powerful. He looked around the chamber at all the different species and spoke simply. He said that humans came from a world that showed them no mercy, so they learned to show mercy to each other. They knew what it meant to struggle and suffer and fear. That was exactly why they wanted to help others avoid those experiences. He stated that humanity was asking to join the council, not as conquerors or threats, but as friends and allies who would stand beside other species in times of need. The crystalline leader called for the vote. The holographic displays showed each delegate's decision as it was recorded. The count began climbing slowly with votes both for and against humanity's membership. Ryan and Lisa watched in tense silence as the numbers changed. The vote was closer than they had hoped, but gradually the count in favor began to pull ahead. The final tally appeared on the displays. Humanity's application had passed by a margin of 68% in favor. It was not unanimous and it was not overwhelming, but it was enough. The crystalline leader announced that humanity was accepted into the Galactic Council as a provisional member with full privileges pending review in 5 years. The chamber erupted in a mix of applause and other sounds that various species made to express approval. Vestic's platform moved closer to theirs, and the Kolari delegate extended all 4 arms in a gesture of friendship. Lisa laughed with relief, and Ryan felt tension drain from his shoulders. They had done it. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. Over the following days, Ryan was assigned as the permanent security liaison to the council, while Lisa became head of the new Interspecies Biology Institute. They moved out of their isolated quarters into regular diplomatic housing and found that aliens no longer fled from their presence. Some species remained cautious, but others approached with genuine curiosity. The Quillari child visited Lisa regularly and brought friends who wanted to meet the human who had saved so many lives. Ryan found himself training council security forces in rescue operations and discovered that teaching others was almost as rewarding as performing rescues himself. Slowly but surely, humans were becoming part of the galactic community. On their last evening before other human diplomats arrived to establish a permanent embassy, Ryan and Lisa stood at an observation window looking out at the stars. Vestic joined them, and the 3 of them stood in comfortable silence. The Quillari finally spoke and said that it had been wrong to fear humans. Ryan smiled and said that fear of the unknown was natural, and that understanding took time. Lisa added that she was grateful for the chance to prove that humans could be trusted. Vestic made a sound like gentle bubbling that the translator interpreted as laughter. The Quillari said that the galaxy was about to be